The vast emptiness of space surrounded the human exploration vessel Pioneer as it drifted beyond the edge of charted territory. Captain James Walker stood on the bridge, his weathered face illuminated by the glow of unfamiliar star systems on the main view screen. "Sir, we're picking up an artificial signal," reported Officer Green, her eyes wide with excitement. "It's not one of ours." After decades of searching, humanity had finally found proof they weren't alone. Walker straightened his uniform and took a deep breath. History would remember this moment. "Send the greeting package," he ordered. What happened next exceeded all human expectations. Within hours, a fleet of ships unlike anything humans had ever built emerged from what appeared to be tears in space itself. They didn't attack. Instead, they surrounded the Pioneer and sent a communication signal that the ship's computers somehow understood. "Greetings, new species. You have entered Senate space. Please prepare for diplomatic contact." The Senate delegation arrived on the Pioneer with little fanfare. 12 beings of various shapes and sizes. Some floated, others walked on many legs, and one appeared to be made entirely of shifting light. Their spokesperson was a tall, four-armed being with blue skin that seemed to shimmer with age. "I am Lorne, senior diplomatic envoy of the Galactic Senate," it said, voice melodious and calm. "We represent 27 spacefaring civilizations who have maintained peace for over 6,000 years. Walker tried to hide his amazement as he led the delegation to the ship's conference room. Humans had barely managed to avoid destroying themselves over the centuries. The idea of thousands of years of interspecies peace seemed impossible. In the following days, the crew learned that the Senate operated on principles of cooperation, shared knowledge, and strict rules about warfare. Member species contributed to a common defense force, a shared scientific database, and followed established diplomatic protocols. "Your species is unusual," Lorne explained during one meeting. "Most achieve space travel after evolving beyond their violent tendencies. Humans appear to have achieved technological advancement while retaining primitive survival instincts." Walker wasn't sure if that was a compliment or criticism. "We're adaptable," he replied simply. The Senate representatives studied Earth's history with growing concern. Wars, conquests, rapidly changing alliances. Humanity's past was filled with conflict. "We have never encountered a species that thrived on such chaos," said Trell, a reptilian Senate member. "It is concerning." After a week of discussions, the Senate offered Earth probationary membership. Humanity would receive access to some Senate technology and knowledge, but would remain under observation. Lorne would stay as an advisor to Earth's newly formed Galactic Relations Department. "Consider this a trial period," Lorne explained to Walker and the newly appointed human diplomats. "Prove that humans can exist peacefully within our coalition." As Walker watched Earth fade into the distance through the viewport of the returning Senate ship, he felt both hope and unease. Humanity had been given an amazing opportunity, but he sensed the Senate's caution wasn't unfounded. "They think we're dangerous," Walker said to his second-in-command. "Aren't we?" she replied with a small smile. Little did either of them know how prophetic their exchange would prove to be, or that within 6 months, humanity's capacity for violence would become the Senate's greatest asset and their greatest fear. 6 months into Earth's probationary period with the Galactic Senate, the situation changed dramatically. Captain Walker sat in the new Earth Embassy on Station 7, the massive Senate hub that orbited a neutral star system. He watched with growing concern as holographic displays showed another Senate world under attack. "That's the third this month," said Lorne, the blue-skinned diplomatic advisor assigned to humanity. His normally calm voice carried an edge of worry. "The Void Walkers grow bolder with each assault." The Void Walkers had emerged from deep space without warning. Strange crystalline beings that seemed to flow between solid and energy states, they attacked without demands or communication. Their ships were angular, black structures that absorbed weapon fire like sponges. "Why haven't the Senate forces stopped them?" asked Walker, watching as another defense fleet retreated from battle. Lorne's forehands moved in a gesture of frustration. The Senate military follows standard response protocols developed over thousands of years of peace. They are inflexible. The humans had learned that Senate species believed in measured, proportional responses. Their military doctrine focused on containment and defensive positions rather than aggressive action. Admiral Bell, Earth's military representative, leaned forward. "These Void Walkers don't fight like you're used to. They don't care about your rules." On the display, crystal ships tore through another defensive line. Senate forces retreated in perfect formation, sacrificing the outer colonies to protect core worlds. "The Senate Council meets tomorrow to discuss response options," Lorne said. "It may take several sessions to reach consensus." Walker and Bell exchanged glances. In human terms, that meant weeks of debate while more worlds fell. Later that evening, Walker received an encrypted message from Earth Command. Human intelligence ships had been secretly tracking Void Walker movements. They had detected patterns the Senate forces hadn't noticed. The attackers weren't random. They were methodically eliminating Senate defensive capabilities in preparation for a larger assault. The next day at the Senate meeting, Walker watched as representatives from 27 species debated protocols and historical precedents. Some spoke of negotiation attempts, others of establishing new defensive perimeters. "The Void Walkers have destroyed 14 outposts and 3 colonies," reported a tall, insect-like senator. "We must adjust our defense grid according to Section 42 of the military charter." When Walker was finally recognized to speak, he stood and activated his own data display. "While you've been talking, 2 more worlds have sent distress signals," he said, projecting the information for all to see. "Earth formally requests permission to engage our ships against the Void Walkers." The chamber erupted in murmurs. A floating gas-based senator drifted forward. "Humans are under probationary status," it said. "Your military vessels are not authorized for Senate conflicts." "We've analyzed their attack patterns," Walker continued, showing the data Earth Command had gathered. "They're not just raiding. They're preparing for a full invasion." The Senate representatives looked uncomfortable. Many had never experienced real war in their lifetimes. "Your species is too aggressive," said a small, rodent-like senator. "Your battle tactics have not been approved. We cannot risk escalation." As the debate continued without resolution, Walker received an urgent message. Earth long-range sensors had detected a massive Void Walker fleet assembling at the edge of Senate space. Their trajectory suggested they were targeting the main refugee evacuation route from the fallen worlds. Millions of displaced civilians from 3 species would be in danger. Walker looked up at the still-debating Senate and made a decision. Without speaking, he sent an encrypted message to Admiral Bell. "Prepare Earth Fleet. We move regardless of Senate approval." The growing threat would not wait for committee decisions. Commander Thomas Reed stood on the bridge of the Earth battleship Defender, watching the tactical display with narrowed eyes. His small battle group of 5 human vessels had positioned themselves between the approaching Void Walker fleet and the refugee transport convoy. "Senate Command is ordering us to stand down," said Communications Officer Parker. "They're saying this is an unauthorized military action." Reed ignored the message. Through the view screen, he could see the massive refugee ships, bulky, unarmed vessels packed with families who had fled their dying worlds. Behind them, the Senate escort ships maintained their defensive formation, too few to repel a serious attack. "Void Walker fleet will intercept in 7 minutes," reported the tactical officer. 27 crystal ships detected. Reed nodded calmly. "Send to all Earth vessels. Execute Battle Plan Theta. No retreat until those refugees are clear." Across the small human fleet, crews moved with practiced efficiency. Unlike the rigid formations and standardized responses of Senate forces, the human ships began splitting into seemingly random patterns. When the Void Walkers arrived, they encountered something entirely different from previous battles. Instead of a wall of ships firing standard energy weapons, they faced scattered targets that refused to stay in one place. Human vessels darted between the crystal ships, firing modified weapons that seemed to target specific points on the Void Walker hulls. "They're confused," said Reed with grim satisfaction. "They've never faced ships that don't follow Senate battle protocols." The refugee convoy continued its lumbering journey towards safety while the human vessels executed their chaotic dance. 2 Earth ships took heavy damage, their hulls glowing red from enemy fire, but they continued fighting. On the Senate command ship watching from a safe distance, Admiral Vox, a veteran of 30 years, stared in disbelief. "What are they doing?" he asked his second in command. "Their formation makes no sense." "They have no formation," replied his officer. "Each ship appears to be acting independently while somehow coordinating their attacks." The battle reached its peak when Reed ordered a maneuver that seemed like madness to the watching Senate forces. 3 human ships deliberately flew into the center of the Void Walker fleet, drawing concentrated fire while the remaining 2 targeted the lead crystal ship with everything they had. "Hull breach on decks 3 through 7, reported Defender's damage control officer, voice steady despite the sparks flying around the bridge. "Life support failing in the lower sections." Reed gripped his command chair as the ship shuddered. "Continue the attack. We hold until those refugees clear the system." The lead Void Walker ship suddenly shattered into crystalline fragments, creating a chain reaction that disrupted the enemy formation. In the confusion, the human ships struck again and again at weak points they had identified. After 37 minutes of brutal combat, the remaining Void Walker vessels retreated, something Senate forces had never witnessed before. The refugee convoy completed its jump to safety, with all 12 transport ships intact. The human battle group limped back toward Senate space. 2 ships were so badly damaged they had to be evacuated, their crews transferred to the remaining vessels. Reed's own ship had lost a third of its hull and 17 crew members. When they finally docked at the nearest Senate station, Reed was immediately summoned to answer for his unauthorized action. He walked into the Senate meeting chamber, still wearing his blood-stained uniform. "You disobeyed direct orders," stated the Senate military counselor. "Yes," Reed answered simply, "and we saved over 30,000 civilian lives." The chamber fell silent as the Senate representatives looked at each other uncomfortably. Finally, the senior counselor spoke. "How did you defeat them when our forces could not?" Reed's expression remained neutral. "We fought to win, not to follow procedure." That day marked the breaking point in Senate human relations, the moment when the galactic powers realized they might need what humans offered, even as they feared it. The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Senate buzzed with tense voices. For the first time in over 2,000 years, an emergency vote had been called to overturn a standing military doctrine. "We have no choice," said High Counselor Mez, their translucent tentacles rippling with stress patterns. "The Void Walkers have destroyed 7 more worlds while we debated." Captain Walker and Commander Reed stood at the center of the chamber, surrounded by representatives of 27 species. Some looked at the humans with fear, others with desperate hope. "The motion passes," announced the Senate Speaker after the vote. "Earth forces are formally requested to assist in Senate defense operations." Within days, a joint human-Senate military initiative was established. The Senate reluctantly opened their technology archives to human engineers, while Earth's tactical experts analyzed Void Walker attack patterns. Inside the newly established Joint Defense Center, Dr. Elena Rice worked tirelessly. A brilliant scientist from Earth's Quantum Physics Division, she had been studying the crystalline fragments recovered from destroyed Void Walker ships. "Their molecular structure is unlike anything we've seen," she explained to a mixed team of human and Senate scientists. "It's not just crystal. It's something between matter and energy." While the Senate scientists methodically documented each property according to established research protocols, Dr. Rice took a different approach. She subjected the fragments to every possible environmental variable: heat, cold, radiation, and sound. "Look at this," she exclaimed one day, pointing to a sample that was vibrating under a specific sound frequency. "The crystal structure destabilizes completely under this acoustic pattern." The Senate scientists were baffled. "We never considered sound as a weapon," admitted lead researcher Vel. Our combat methodologies focus on energy and projectile systems. Humans have been using sound as a weapon since our tribal days, replied Reyes. We just needed to find the right frequency. Meanwhile, in the tactical center, Reed worked with Senate commanders to retrain their forces. The rigid, procedure-focused Senate officers struggled with human combat concepts. You can't just stand in formation and exchange fire, Reed explained, frustration evident in his voice. You need to adapt, to surprise them. Senior Commander Pell, a respected Senate officer, shook his scaled head. Your tactics seem dishonorable. There are proper ways to conduct warfare. There's only one proper way, Reed countered, the way that keeps your people alive. As the training continued, human engineers worked with Senate technicians to modify their ships. Standard Senate vessels were elegant and efficient, but lacked the redundant systems and combat flexibility of human designs. Why do you need 3 backup systems for life support? Asked a Senate engineer. Because the first 2 might get blown up, replied the human technician matter-of-factly. The cultural differences created tension, but the growing Void Walker threat pushed both sides to cooperate. Earth ships were upgraded with advanced Senate technology, while Senate vessels were retrofitted with human-designed weapon systems and the newly developed sonic disruptors. Captain Walker, now serving as Earth's representative on the Joint Military Council, received troubling intelligence from the front lines. The Void Walkers are changing course, he informed the Council. All intelligence suggests they're heading toward human space. The Senate representatives looked alarmed. Why target Earth? You're not even full Senate members, asked Councilor Trell. Because we hurt them, Walker said simply. We're the only ones who have. As the meeting concluded, Walker pulled Commander Reed aside. They're coming for us, Thomas. And they're coming in force. Reed nodded grimly. Then they'll see what humans are really capable of. The alliance had been formed out of necessity, but neither humans nor Senate species fully trusted the other. What none of them realized was that the approaching battle would change the galaxy's understanding of warfare forever, and humanity's place within it. The combined human-Senate fleet gathered in orbit around Proxima Centauri, Earth's nearest colony world. 67 Senate vessels arranged themselves in their traditional crescent formation, while the 23 human warships took positions that seemed random to the Senate commanders. Your ships appear disorganized, observed Admiral Vox from the Senate flagship. It would be more efficient to integrate with our formation. Commander Reed, now Fleet Commander of the Human Forces, smiled thinly. We're exactly where we need to be, Admiral. The long-range sensors detected the Void Walker Armada 2 hours before arrival, over 100 crystalline vessels moving as one deadly unit. This was the largest force they had ever assembled, clearly intended to crush humanity in a single strike. All ships, battle stations, Reed ordered. Execute Operation Thunderclap on my mark. Unlike previous engagements, the human forces had insisted on commanding their own ships while coordinating with Senate forces. The Senate Military Council had reluctantly agreed, though several members expressed concerns about unpredictable human aggression. As the Void Walker fleet emerged from their faster-than-light travel, they faced what appeared to be a standard Senate defensive position, with the human ships seemingly scattered as an afterthought. They're taking the bait, Reed said quietly, watching the enemy formation adjust to target the Senate crescent. When the Void Walkers closed to firing range, Reed gave the command, "Thunderclap now." Instantly, hidden cargo ships behind Proxima's moon launched thousands of small objects toward the enemy fleet. The Senate commanders watched in confusion as these projectiles, too small to cause damage, detonated around the Void Walker ships. "What are those?" Admiral Vox demanded. "Sonic disruptors," replied Lieutenant Ford, Reed's communications officer. "Just watch." The detonations released precise sound frequencies that Dr. Reyes had discovered. The crystalline hulls of the Void Walker ships began to vibrate, creating visible stress patterns across their surfaces. At that exact moment, the scattered human vessels executed a perfectly timed maneuver, concentrating their fire on the weakened crystal structures. 3 Void Walker ships shattered immediately. The enemy fleet, faced with an attack they had never encountered, shifted into a defensive formation. This was precisely what Reed had anticipated. "Senate fleet, advance now," he ordered. The Senate vessels, for once following human tactical leadership, punched through the enemy's weakened center. What followed was unlike any battle the Senate species had witnessed in thousands of years of space combat. Human ships executed maneuvers that their Senate allies considered suicidal. 2 damaged Earth vessels deliberately collided with larger Void Walker ships, their fusion cores detonating on impact. Human commanders made split-second decisions that broke every rule in the Senate military doctrine. On Reed's flagship, the bridge shook violently as they absorbed another hit. "Decks 5 through 8 are breached," reported the damage control officer. "We've lost engines 2 and 3. Reed grimly studied the tactical display. "Reroute power from life support to weapons. Target their lead vessel." The Senate observer on Reed's bridge stared in horror. "You're sacrificing life support." "We can breathe for 6 minutes without it," Reed replied. "We only need 2. The battle raged for 3 hours. Senate ships maintained their disciplined formations, while human vessels darted between enemy lines, drawing fire and creating openings. The Void Walkers, confused by the unpredictable attacks, began to lose cohesion. "They're breaking," shouted Reed's tactical officer. The massive enemy fleet, for the first time since they had appeared in Senate space, began to retreat. But Reed wasn't finished. "Pursuit force, engage as planned," he ordered. 5 of the fastest human ships broke formation and chased the retreating enemy, firing continuously. The Senate commanders watched in shock. Pursuing a retreating enemy violated their most basic military ethics. "What are they doing?" Admiral Vox asked, aghast. Reed's voice was cold and clear over the communication channel. "Making sure they never come back." The observation deck of the Senate diplomatic vessel Silent Observer offered a perfect view of the battlefield's aftermath. Debris from shattered Void Walker ships drifted through space, glittering like deadly stars. Damaged human and Senate vessels limped toward repair stations. Senior Observer Trell watched with a mixture of relief and growing unease. Beside him, 3 other Senate representatives remained silent, their recording devices capturing everything. "The battle is won," said Captain Walker, joining them on the deck. His uniform was torn, and a bandage covered one side of his face. "The remaining Void Walker ships have retreated beyond sensor range." "Yes," Trell replied slowly. "A victory at considerable cost." Through the viewport, they could see human rescue ships moving between the wreckage, their spotlights searching for survivors. Unlike Senate recovery protocols, which followed precise patterns, the human vessels darted chaotically wherever their sensors detected life signs. "Your commanders made unexpected choices," said Trell carefully. Walker's expression remained neutral. "We did what was necessary." The Senate observation team had witnessed things during the battle that violated every principle of their military doctrine. Commander Reed had sacrificed 3 ships to create attack opportunities. Human soldiers had continued fighting despite injuries that would have incapacitated any Senate species. "That pilot," said another observer, pointing to a small craft that was towing a damaged fighter. "Our sensors indicated he suffered multiple broken bones during the initial exchange, yet he continued flying." Walker nodded. "Lieutenant Miller. Good man." "How?" asked Trell. "How could he function with such injuries?" "Pain can be ignored," Walker replied simply. "Failure cannot." The observers exchanged troubled glances. Throughout the battle, they had recorded hundreds of instances that defy their understanding of acceptable combat behavior. Humans ignoring mortal wounds to complete objectives. Engineers working in radiation-flooded sections to repair critical systems, knowing they were receiving lethal doses. The pursuit force that had chased down retreating Void Walker ships, ensuring total victory rather than allowing the enemy to escape and regroup. Most disturbing had been Commander Reed's decision to sacrifice the outer defense ring, deliberately allowing 5 human ships to be destroyed to create an opening for the main attack. The Senate military had no protocol for such tactics. Acceptable losses were calculated in advance, not decided in the moment. "We must report what we have seen to the Senate Council," Trell said finally. The main view screen activated, showing Commander Reed's flagship returning from the pursuit operation. The vessel was barely recognizable. Over 60% of its hull was damaged or missing, with emergency force fields containing the atmosphere in multiple sections. "Your ships weren't designed to withstand such damage," said the third observer. "How is it still operational?" "We build redundancies," Walker explained, "and our crews are trained to improvise." A transmission came through from Reed's vessel. The commander appeared on screen, his bridge filled with smoke and wounded crew members. Behind him, officers continued working despite injuries and chaos. "Pursuit complete," Reed reported matter-of-factly. "All enemy vessels within our range have been neutralized. We're returning with Engine 3 at 28% capacity. Request medical teams stand by." When the transmission ended, the Senate observers stood in silence. Finally, Trell turned to Walker. "Your people fought like nothing we have ever witnessed," he said quietly. "It was not just your technology or tactics. It was something more primitive. Your species does not simply engage in combat. You commit to it totally." Walker looked out at his damaged fleet, the cost of victory written in broken ships and lost lives. "We've been fighting for survival since we first picked up rocks against predators," he said. "It's in our blood." As the observation vessel prepared to return to Senate headquarters, Trell made a final note in his report. "Humans do not fight as soldiers following orders. They fight as if every battle is for their very existence. This makes them the most effective and most terrifying military force in known space." The Senate would receive this report within days. Their response would change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. 2 weeks after the Battle of Proxima Centauri, the Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Senate was filled to capacity. Representatives from all 27 member species sat in tiered rows, their attention focused on the central platform where the High Council presided. Captain Walker and Commander Reed stood side by side, dressed in formal Earth military uniforms. They had been summoned to hear the Senate's official response to the battle. "This emergency session will now begin," announced the Senate Speaker, a tall being with silvery skin. "We are here to address the matter of human military involvement in Senate affairs." Walker glanced at Reed, noting the fresh scars on his friend's face. Neither of them had expected to be called before the full Senate so soon after their victory. The mood in the chamber felt wrong. There was tension instead of gratitude. High Counselor Mez rose from the central seat. "The Senate has reviewed all reports from the Battle of Proxima Centauri. We acknowledge that the Void Walker threat has been neutralized through human military action." A murmur ran through the chamber. Walker felt a moment of pride. They had saved countless lives. However, Mez continued, "We have also reviewed the methods employed by human forces." The chamber darkened as holographic displays activated, showing scenes from the battle. Human ships performing maneuvers that broke formation. Wounded soldiers fighting despite catastrophic injuries. Commander Reed giving the order to sacrifice the outer defense ring. The Senate military doctrine, established 3,000 years ago, defines acceptable combat protocols, said Mez. Human tactics violated every principle of this doctrine. Reed stepped forward. "With respect, those violations won us the battle." "Yes," acknowledged Mez. "That is precisely what concerns us." The displays changed to show Senate observers recordings of the aftermath. The pursuit force destroying retreating Void Walker ships. Human rescue teams working in lethal conditions to save comrades. Engineers exposing themselves to radiation to repair critical systems. "Humans do not fight as we do," stated Admiral Vox, rising to address the Senate. "They do not recognize limitations that all civilized species accept. They continue fighting when they should retreat. They sacrificed themselves without hesitation. They pursued total victory rather than acceptable resolution. Walker felt his jaw tighten. We fought to protect both your worlds and ours. And we are grateful, said Counselor Trell, who had been on the observation vessel. But we are also afraid. The word hung in the air. Afraid. Walker looked around the chamber, suddenly understanding. The Senate species weren't angry. They were terrified of what they had witnessed. After hours of testimony and deliberation, the High Council called for a vote. The result was unanimous. Med stood to deliver the verdict. By decision of the Galactic Senate, effective immediately, all human military forces are banned from participation in Senate conflicts. Earth's status is hereby changed to protected independent territory, not members of the Senate, but under our protection. Protected? Reed asked incredulously. You mean contained? Mez continued without acknowledging the comment. Human ships will be permitted for trade and diplomatic missions only. All military vessels must remain within Earth's solar system or colony worlds. Senate monitoring stations will be established at the boundaries of human space. Walker couldn't believe what he was hearing. After everything we did, after the lives we lost protecting you, you're restricting us. No, Captain, said Trell gently. We're restricting ourselves from using you. The final proclamation was recorded into the Senate archives. Humanity represents a weapon too dangerous to wield. They fight not as soldiers, but as survivors with no conception of acceptable losses. We thank them for their service and pray we never need it again. As Walker and Reed were escorted from the chamber, a Senate diplomat named Lorne, the same one who had first welcomed humans to galactic society, approached them quietly. You should understand something, Lorne said, voice low. The Senate has existed for thousands of years without facing a threat it couldn't handle through established protocols. Then humans fought one battle and succeeded where we had failed repeatedly. And that's why you fear us, said Walker. Lorne's four hands made a gesture of agreement. We do not fear what you have done, Captain. We fear what you would become if we allowed you to fight our wars, for your sake, as well as ours. Walker watched the Senate representatives filing out of the chamber. They had won humanity's first interstellar battle, only to lose their place in galactic society. What happens now? Asked Reed. We go home, Walker replied, and hope they never need us again.